Hola, ¿qué tal? Muy buenas tardes.
Hello, good afternoon. Yes, there is live on Tuesday, although they are telling us lots of things from the Parliament in Catalonia. I would like to thank all of you that are present here and those who are watching us through streaming. Today is the second Tuesday, and we are celebrating the day of Ada Lovelace. I'm going to today is Ada Lovelace's Day, or it is a day where we celebrate the achievements of women in engineering, mathematics, in science, and so on and so forth. I'm going to stand a little bit further from this microphone. I guess that you will have watched the exhibition about Ada Lovelace. Otherwise, I encourage you to come in and have a look at it. But we have many things to discuss. I would like you to take out your mobile phones and to tweet with this hashtag. There is Vida, Martes. This is a very small device, but perhaps if Ada Lovelace was not a woman, perhaps in the 19th century, perhaps these devices would have arrived much before, because she was very enthusiastic about that. But my guests are going to explain it much better than me. I'm going to ask Marta Esparza, who is the curator of the exhibition, to come up to the podium. Reyes, what an exhibition you have put together. This is a beautiful exhibition with a character that many of our guests will know about. I don't know if you are very fond or very fans of Ada. I don't know what we could call that. Adaists or Ada... I don't know what to call them. We have another microphone. We have lots of things here. It's a pleasure to see. What would we call ourselves? Adaists? Adaophiles? No, that doesn't sound very good. Okay, let's call ourselves Adaists, because Ada Lovelace, we were discussing it just a while ago, is a character that if you put her into a novel, they would tell you it's impossible to believe that. Don't make up the story. That is too much. The story of Ada Lovelace, as they call it in English, is fascinating. When we started thinking about this exhibition, if you haven't seen the exhibition, it's just on here, just at the back of this room, just round the corner. But we wanted to condensate everything in such a small space, because this was really like a whole movie. It's difficult not only to condensate, but also to find objects or exhibits of that time. No, I think that what was very difficult to achieve was to find objects that belonged to her. What happened? We came up with the idea of let's tell what kind of objects someone with that social position could have at that time. But it's really difficult, but there were lots of museums that offer themselves to lend us some pieces. The Museo of the Medicine Association of Medical Doctors, Rijksmuseum, everyone was lending us objects when we considered the possibility of putting together an exhibition about Ada Lovelace. So that is a preliminary project, was much more difficult than getting it done in the end, because when we decided to contact the museums, the response was excellent. There's a part of the exhibition that I love, because a great part of her story is known because her mother preserved the letters that she wrote. She was very fond of writing letters to her mother and to many other people. Yeah, she was writing letters to Mary Somerville, Faraday, Babbage, Augustus de Morgan, lots of people. And there is an anecdote that she's writing to the same rider that was bringing the letters had come back and forth several times. So they were saying, as you were telling me this morning in your letter, so it was amazing. She would really be using the mobile phone now, wouldn't she? Yes, of course. Yeah, she was a lady with a very good social position. Her mother was, although she ended up having some difficulties, economic difficulties, but she, all that story and the way they lived in that time is also reflected in the exhibition. Yes, through her objects you can see how they lived at that point in time. We have, for example, tongs for the hair, containers for the makeup powder, and so on. So thinking about those trips that she did to London, she travels there, and the pencils that she uses, which are beautiful. So the idea was to reflect that world and that those objects and the fans, the powder cases. And there's a note in one of the newspapers of that time that says, "It is very sad that the son of the Lord Byron, who was her father, that is a very gross woman," and she was focused on other things. Although she was surrounded by those objects and those luxury objects, she was very fond of other things in life. So her mother, trying to tame that imagination that she talks about, says, let's teach her mathematics so that she doesn't become carried away. So she wanted to separate her from that inheritance, that legacy that she has from her father, Lord Byron. Lord Byron says, "I hope that she doesn't end up being a poet like myself." Yeah, she was a poet, but with numbers, wasn't she? Yes, she also wrote poetry. Okay, apart from all these objects that have to do with their personal life, please tell me about the analytical machine, this artifact. The truth is that we really wanted to exhibit part of this invention of Baba's, with which she collaborates, and we talked to the Science Museum, asking, not of course asking for the machine itself because it is gigantic, but a preliminary model which is has some fragments that were left by Baba's. They don't lend them because they are on permanent exhibition at the Science Museum. They are part of an exhibition devoted to the analytical machine of Ada. So we were missing some parts, and we came up with the idea of reproducing that machine so that we can fit it into our cases, our exhibition furniture, and we did it, and it is made of different pieces, different mechanical pieces that we use, and they work, they even work, and it's an excellent reproduction, because Charles Babbage wasn't able to build a machine such as he wanted it to be built, because it was really very difficult to build it, and no, of course they were not at the time when that could be possible. And it would be gigantic if they would have achieved that. It would have had the size of a football, of a soccer field, and you would have needed a steam engine to move it around, and the precision would have been almost impossible at that time. Since we are in this time and we are looking at the comic, we see Charles with such a huge machine that was impossible to build, and which gives us an idea of the analytical machine. That would have been more or less the size of it. This belongs to a comic by Sidney Paddock. I recommend it, really. It's an invention. This is our reproduction of the analytical machine. Sidney Paddock has this book, The Adventures of Babbage and Ada Lovelace. one is devoted to the real story, and the second part is like a turn of the story, just bringing it a little bit further. But it's a beautiful comic. It's not just the drawings; it is a documentation that it has behind. There is a whole array of documents and of documentation that they have been researching in order to really present us the story such as it was. So thank you very much, and we invite all of you to have a look at the exhibition. Thank you very much for your comments. Thank you very much, and I hope that you enjoy this Tuesday.
Por cierto, que ya que estamos hablando de dibujos.
So we are talking about drawings now. You know that we have our own artist who in this small amount of time has been able to draw some drawings, to do some drawings. He is the fastest drawer this side of the Fuencarral street. We will have a look at some of his drawings. He will be the whole afternoon. Everything that is said by the guests is going to be covered. He says no, but I can tell you that he gathers everything in those comments that he adds. You can talk to our guests through Twitter. I encourage all of you to tweet as much as you can, and we don't need to send letters any longer. So I'm going to invite Ada Lovelace to join us. Adela, 20 years ago you asked yourself what is happening with a scientific woman, with scientist women. You have just published a book about that, Sabías, where you gather some of the stories of these scientist women. Yeah, I started some time ago, even more than that, 25 years ago. And I was just surprised because I have many colleagues and some teachers and professors, and when I went to university it was all men. So I really wondered whether there were no scientist women. I started searching and researching, and in my trips to conferences and in libraries and bookstores, and there were women, but they hadn't reached Spain, and they were not in the official books about history of science. And so this hobby of mine has grown, and I started giving conferences. I published an article in some years ago, 20 years ago, and then I ended up with this book, Sabias, Wise Women. And this has given me a lot of pleasure, because I thought this was a minority topic, but it was uncomfortable even for the most feminist women. It seemed to be uncomfortable, and scientists and in the past have achieved many things, and nobody dealt with that. But it was published this year, and I have been invited to 60 places between newspapers, radio stations, specialized fora, lots of places where I have been invited to give conferences or to discuss or to participate in roundtables. There seems to be a fad with scientist women, because they are fascinating. I understand it perfectly. But Ada was one of them. Let's call it Ada or Ada. Let's. This is an international talk, and so what do you think? Should we call her Ada or Ada? Okay, let's call her Ada. Ada and Ada for our British friends. So these scientist women normally have a fascinating life, because in order to achieve something in science at that time, apart from a privileged mind, they should have some other virtues, like, for example, having a huge emotional intelligence in order to overcome all barriers that they had to face. And not just for women, but for women who even wanted to think for themselves. Ada suffered more, in particular, the threats of her professors that wrote to her mother saying that she was extremely intelligent, but the effort that could be bad for her health because she concentrated so much on learning. What he said was not something that he had invented, but up until the beginning of the 20th century, when a woman studied a lot, they thought that that could prejudice her physically and severely, and to come to an atrophy of the sexual organs, and probably the impossibility to have children. It seems to be something to laugh at right now, but that was a reality that Ada had to suffer, and that many other women had to suffer. Among all data that we have collected for my book, Sabias, which is this one of the things that I found is that at the female colleges in Cambridge at the end of the 19th century, that was the first ones that they opened, and they did systematic studies where they found that the women that studied didn't have any more problems than those who hadn't when it comes to having children. In order to try to get rid of that tradition, that long-standing tradition or idea. But they were exceptional people. They were exceptional women. They had personalities that really stood out. And I'm very proud, and I'm very happy that the society is now rediscovering them. They are a source of inspiration for many of us, and they have a lot of passion in their lives, passion for their studies and for their learning. In the case of Ada, did she have that stigma? She had it so much assimilated it, so to speak, that she does more than a translation. But when she writes the notes of the sketch of this machine, which is a translation of the article of Mena Brea, she doesn't even dare to sign it with her name, so that it is not identified as done by a woman, and in case it might prejudice the invention, which was the case in the end. We are talking about the first half of the 19th century, and it continued to be like that. We were saying that up until the end of the 20th century, with an author that has great success right now, that it has been the case up to then. And I'm just remembering women as fascinating as Ada, with lots of adventure and dangers in their life. Marie-Anne Lavoisier, the wife of the father of chemistry, she played a very important role in the development of chemistry as a drawer, a scale drawer of all the devices that Antoine used. And she was a translator from English and Latin, and as well as the aid of her husband in the laboratory. But one of her main activities was that of a translator. She had many scientific debates. Her husband had many debates with foreigners, with foreign scientists, and she was translating everything. And she translated the essay of Richard Kirman's essay based on which Lavoisier proved wrong that theory, and that would be the first version of the translation that Marie did of that theory. In the end, she has some notes where she doesn't even sign with her initials. She just signs a note of the translator's note. And I could see that in one of the books that were preserved there, that I had the pleasure to enjoy as a member of the university. She didn't even initial her work, and in the figures he includes her initials in order to hide her identity. She used to hide, and they were usually hidden by men as well. When you attend talks and presentations, do you find lots of young women or girls that ask you, I want to study science, or I have found an example here or something? In many areas, yes, but when we go to talks about scientists, women, they have an interest on those women. Generally speaking, chemistry, for example, is an area, biology, medicine, they are a majority. They are mathematics. Up until recently, most of the students were women. But then you have physics, where they don't exceed 20%, and there are some where there is a reduction, like, for example, the Ada Lovelace's field, like, for example, engineering and IT. In a theater play that we are putting together, I have a colleague that is an computer engineer, and she has only one person, and we're talking about a group of 60 or 70 students, and that's a problem, because there's a reduction in the amount of women in some areas, and we are missing that talent in the first stages of that science. If there are many women and many female girls who are interested on technology, but it seems that IT and computers don't seem to be an area for women, and that's I don't know why we have that idea, but that's the case. And there are some universities, like, for example, the University of Barcelona, where a professor was telling me that there were only 24% since 2004 to now. There was a reduction, a permanent reduction of women. She hasn't done a study in detail. She's just looking at the data from 1995, where she found an increase, and now there is a reduction since 2004 to now. She detects a reduction, and her theory is that now girls perceive that mathematics are a subject which is very much related to big data and to computers and to technology, and that is something for boys. So the Ada's example is more necessary than ever right now, I think, and such a privileged mind and creative mind and poetic mind and courageous one, with her passion which made her overcome the opposition of a mother that was controlling her very strictly, to devote herself to that subject and to study mathematics. I think that she is today an example, a very much needed example, to try to reverse that trend that we are seeing right now, the lack of interest on the part of women and girls on technology. You have mentioned a play with a group of colleagues, and we can see some photographs there. If someone plays them there, puts them there. Yeah. We needed one more beat. There. You have a theater ensemble. A group, each one represents a wise woman, a character. Yeah, there you are. This is Ada. She is a computer engineer who is a professor at the University of Seville in the computer science engineering, computer engineering, and she finds groups of 60 people where perhaps there is one or two women. That was started by a man who has a daughter that is 11 years of age right now, and he wanted to show her that she could be whatever she liked, and that nothing was forbidden for her. And since he works at this school and he found that there were not many pupils, female pupils, he just wanted to bring that to her and to explain that to her through a conference. And he decided to look for 5 professors, who were female professors, to put ourselves in the shoes of 5 wise women of the past, and to come out in the end with our genes and so on. And we have an excellent photograph that was taken by one of the attendees that is right now among the audience, and where we combine the present and the past characters, so that his daughter and the colleagues and the fellow students could see that scientists, women, were flesh and bone women, so to speak, and that we continue to have that passion for science that those characters had had. Eddie Lamar is in the centers, Hypatia from Alexandria, and Miss Curie. And we also have chemistry, crystallographic chemistry, Rosalie Franklin. She had to develop the X-ray, which was the basis to decipher the structure of DNA, in spite of which her contribution was not recognized, because when they gave the Nobel Prize for the resolution of the DNA structure, she had already died. She died a little bit older than Ada, when she was 38 years, and perhaps that was due to the exposure to the X-ray sources in order to record all the photographs of the DNA crystals. And perhaps that's why we have decided to do this play. Paco, the creator of the idea, the factotum, so to speak, in this play, he wanted to show his daughter that was the case, that was possible. And so we fill this theater with young children the whole morning, with different ages, different age groups, and we did that play. There were many demands from other schools to continue. We have organized 19 representations, 19 performances. We have more than 5,000 people that have already watched the play, and we have also a group in Catalonia that are also doing this play in the schools, and then in Cantabria, and then in Pamplona there is also a group of engineers in Pamplona. The engineers in the science faculty of the Public University of Navarra have also joined together to organize another performance, to choose the characters and so on, and to put together their own play and go around the schools in Navarra.
Esperamos que esto sirva.
So we hope this helps us show boys and girls that science is also a thing for girls, for themselves. Among those 5,000, among all those people in the public, some of them have found their calling. Yes, but not only that, because we want to transmit all of the everyone in the audience how beautiful science is. Marie Curie, in one of her latest speeches, which happened to be here in Spain in 1934, 1 year before she died, she held a press conference called The Future of Culture, where she appealed the beauty of science, the beauty itself. Human beings need to understand the world around them, and when they understand that world around them, they can deduce ways of applying things. Our world is constantly evolving due to the different applications or the different uses we can make out of the new discoveries or the new background. And Marie Curie, in her speech in Spain, claim that science has an enormous beauty, and we want to transmit it. We also want to transmit that passion for discovering. They felt that passion, we feel it as well, and we want to transmit it. We want to stick to 1 hour. We don't want to bore the children to tears. And in the end of that hour, they feel very curious. They want to know more things. They wonder whether we are going to be awarded the Nobel Prize. They want to study engineering. They feel curious about it, and they wonder many things. So the least we want is to transmit curiosity for science and the beauty of it. We're going to talk about the beauty of science, but let's look at the beauty of Enrique's drawings. Because everything that's said here is going to be recorded in drawing by Enrique, and here it is. This is his comic strip with lots of information. So Enrique Flores is drawing us. This is a robot portrait of everything that's being said here. And to talk about the beauty of mathematics and the beauty of Ada Lovelace work, we are going to have our next guest here with us, Zoe Philpott. So if we are to speak about beauty, and if we are to speak about Ada's work, we need to speak about how that beauty ends up being depicted in Zoe's work. She has got a great show, and you're all welcome to watch it. And it's beautiful, it's wonderful. It's called Ada. I would say it's a bright show where you interact with the audience and you want to highlight how important Ada is, and you want to tell that to people, and you want to encourage them to study science. You want to study women and girls to study science.
I'm just going to share, it's very strange listening to a man's voice while watching you speak.
Yeah, I know. Mi voz es grave, o sea que...
But I do have a deep voice, though. Pues sí.
So, was the question...
¿Cómo surgió este espectáculo?
How did you come up with this show?
I came up with this show because I was walking through London, and I was in the middle of London in Piccadilly Circus, and I noticed a group of tourists who were stood beside a statue of a man in bronze, and they were having their picture taken, and I couldn't work out why this family, who looked like they may come from Malaysia or somewhere like that, could be interested in this statue. And then I thought to myself, I'm from London, but I had nothing to do with this statue either. It was a dead bloke who'd probably just killed lots of people 200 years ago. And so I started wondering where all the women were, all the statues of women who'd done great things in history, and realized that they weren't anywhere. And I challenge anyone here to think of more than 5 named women that have statues. And I'm not talking about the Statue of Liberty, because that's the idea of a woman. And so then I thought, well, I want to update history with these missing women, to encourage more women to be brilliant, to reach their potential. And I'm a woman in technology. That's my background, theatre and technology. And so I thought, well, what I do for a living is I don't make statues, but I do tell stories using technology. So I thought, I'm going to tell the story of Ada Lovelace, who was the original woman in technology, and share her with as many people as possible. And that's how we created Ada.
Pues si os parece, vamos a ver un extracto.
Okay, that's great. So let's watch a short piece of Ada.
It will become the tool of our imagination. It is what we ask it to divine. Therein lies the magic.
I'm just amazed of all of the tiny details that came together. The dress and the effects with technology. I loved it.
So you are now the analytical engine. There are fewer people in technology than society needs. Ada Lovelace can be this inspirational role model.
Inspirational. It was extraordinary. She's a great role model for all. Such a great story, performance, lighting, music, coming from, deep to your heart.
Ada Lovelace can be the role model women and men need today to realise that technology can be for everyone.
La verdad es que el público...
The audience in your show really gets emotional and really gets because she actually managed to encourage people with her vision about science and to thrill them with its poetry, with the poetry and science ideas. And you want to transmit this also in your show, don't you?
Definitely do. The strength of Ada can be seen as the way that she can combine creativity with science, methodical thinking, mathematics with poetry, imagination, and that together is her strength and where she excels, and that is really what has created every innovation. And that is why bringing together the arts to tell her story in a way that shares that imagination, but also with the technology, so it gets you thinking, gets you questioning, and that combination really hopes to inspire, excite the audience. And what we do is we couple that technology excitement with the reconstruction of the analytical engine using string. Because you don't expect to talk about technology and use string. But of course, every idea comes first from the mind and then is spoken about, and then you sketch, and then you think, and then you apply. So why not use string? Because a group of people coming together to have their ideas, to use their imagination, and then explore, then get into the technology or the science, is a very natural way of working in every way, in every innovation. And when I was researching Ada and Babbage's work, I discovered drawings and games that they'd done together on paper, and you really got a sense of these two people having conversations, not just in the letters but person to person. So yes, the performance is very much about inspiration, about coming together, people talking, playing, and that's what we like to share about Ada's story.
Soy, por favor.
So pretty please, when are we going to watch your show in Spain?
Fundación Telefónica, bring us here, just invite us.
Ok. Hemos tomado nota, ¿no?
Okay, I'll write this down. Do you hear that? Okay, so until we get Zoe here with her show, I welcome you to watch her talk on TEDx Budapest, where she tells us about a very interesting thing you just mentioned, which is the idea of changing the word history. So it evolves towards a new idea or different ideas. I would like you to explore that.
I think I understand the question. In what I discovered is not something new. It's something that the English language is blessed, that we have history, which is his story. And so there's a lot of people in the English language world are saying we want her story as well. So that's a big movement. So you've got his story, her story. But what I would like to do is make our story. Because for me, it's very important that it's not talked about just to women. The same way as every young person receives all the role models from history that tend to be men, tend to be white men. I would like to see all the young people, all the parents, experiencing an updated history that involves people of different colours, sex, the LGBT, the whole range of everyone, so that we become writers of history and we don't think that the history just belongs to him. The history becomes our story, and that's, I'm doing a small part towards, but the more we do together, everyone, creating those stories, the better, which is why Sabias is such an important book, and all the other books that are out there, to share all the different stories of everyone, but keep it together. Today's really good because there's lots of men and women here. Often these events, you'll have one man and they'll be like, yeah. So this is good.
Por cierto, que antes Adela comentaba esta...
Actually, Adela was mentioning something about this concerning trend in Spanish universities, especially in universities, in maths and IT schools, because there is a trend of less and less women. Does this happen in the UK as well? Because before you were talking about that, about having less female scientists.
It's true. There are less women working in technology than there were 20 years ago. And in colleges there is a fewer women going into technology, fewer young women training in all the STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering and maths. It's as low as 9%. So this is a huge need. I'm particularly focused on technology because I'm being more sort of, direct in my industry. But in the industry of technology, there are companies beginning to struggle to find people to do the jobs. There are so many jobs coming out year and year, and less people to do it. So they need to start talking to the women as well. So now there's money being invested in the large companies to really go and get those girls interested at a young age. So this is very important. We also need to develop inside the businesses to understand that there is a role for women all the way through the business, because they're being left behind, or because of the difference between what's allowable to a man and what's allowable to a woman when it comes to their family. So we need to change also that men can look after the family as much as women can, because men can't get the time off. I don't know, what's it like here in Spain? Do people men get time off to look after the family?
No.
No.
Aquí tenemos un verbo que es...
No, they don't. We have a verb called help. They help.
Really be able to get the support to take the jobs if the men can't be allowed to have the support to look after the family. It needs to be equal in every way so that the industries can find the people.
Apunten, caballeros de la sala y los que nos estén viendo.
So, do you hear that, gentlemen in the room? Do you hear that? We all have to hear this. And to finish off with this talk, let me invite the next person. Let me invite Bolly for the next talk. Bolly is a journalist from Barcelona, by the way. She started being a YouTuber. She was a YouTuber. Now she's an audiovisual creator, and she's a fan. She's a fan. She's been a fan of Ada since she was a teenager. She told me, when I was a teenager, there was no internet, and I loved Ada. What are you talking about? How do you manage to get so thrilled about Ada without the internet and all? Well, this story is beautiful and very funny, actually, because I found out about Ada because a math teacher told us, introduce herself. She came the first day, she introduced herself saying, my name is Ada, and now you need to find out why my name is Ada. That was our first math problem. When I said that there was no internet back then, I meant that I did get to see the abyss. I got to see where there was nothing else. You had to go to Encarta encyclopedia to find out what Ada was, and I couldn't find out who she was, but a colleague did, and Ada was the first contact point with not just programming and IT, but also with women and invisibilized women invisibilized by history, and that was beautiful. And I still thank that teacher of mine. Well, she might be watching you. She is called Ada, and she probably knows that we would be speaking about her today. Oh, by the way, I failed the first exam, and I will never forget that. And I will never forgive it. Well, but by the end of the year, I got the best mark. I got an A. So thank you for that. Okay, so you were struck and amazed about Ada for her intelligence, for her achievements, and also for her courage and her perseverance. Yes, she is very amazing in many ways, because and also interesting sociologically, because she wonders, she asks herself questions we still ask ourselves, many women today. And she used to question whether she was being a good mother. She had 3 children, and she wondered whether she was being a good mother because she had many different ambitions, and maybe she was being less responsible as a woman. So just keep in mind that it was the 19th century, and still today being a mother is very complicated, just let alone how it was back then. And apart from that, she brought together science and art and literature. Maybe there are bridges, there are disseminators, disseminating scientists who are managing to do this now, but she already did this 200 years ago, so it is really inspiring and wonderful. Ada had a privileged intelligence, and she knew that. She knew she was above the average, and she knew her intelligence was special because she could mix art and metaphors, but she was above all a pioneer because she could separate. She came up with informatics actually. And she realized that there were many things to be done with that analytical machine. Yes, she foresaw what could be done with that machine back then, and obviously she didn't only foresee that a machine could do some calculations, more or less complicated. She anticipated that machines could actually create art and music, and back at the time she was already foreseeing a number of bolts and gears and mechanisms and wheels that would end up being what is now. So she was a visionary, and that is also somehow of art. She managed to create from what there is not. Well, with the dress you wear in Ada, you wear a glove and you control your dress, and there is LED lights, and this is kind of a metaphor of the analytical machine, because the cards in that machine is more or less what we called bits later on, like your LED on your dress. So thanks to that, we can now understand how it was her thinking.
The lights are a metaphor for as you just suggested. They're also a metaphor for her because she described herself as shining a light on the future. The dress itself has 4,400 uniquely addressable LEDs. So that means that each one is behaving independently of the other and is separately programmed. Which, do you want me to get technical? Yeah. I won't get very technical, but that means that, so in a theatre you've usually got about 400 lights inside somewhere, like in the Central Theatre in Madrid, and this dress has the equivalent of 11 theatres, and that's what the performer is controlling using the glove during the performance. So it's a lot of tech in a dress. We like to think of it as a bespoke computer inside a bespoke housing, because we wanted to create something like Ada was creating with Babbage, something that hadn't been done before. We wanted to experiment and create something that she would approve of. And so we do, as well as the performance, we do what we call a show and tell, which is where we explain what's under the dress and how it's all working and just how fragile it is, because it doesn't always work. But that is part of the story because of the way that she was taking risks, challenging the norm, experimenting, and so that's part of the show, is that it might not work. And we also talk about how painful it was to create and how many people were involved creating it. And so all of these things, like Ada with Babbage, and all the people in their support network, like her mother and the tutors, they were the people enabling it, so that when a young person or anyone working in science and technology, they realise that it's not just them on their own, it's about the combination of everybody in the room that creates brilliance. And again, you come back to the light, which is brilliance.
Y es una muestra de cómo esta metáfora del pensamiento de Ada.
And this shows how that metaphor can be created using a dress. And Buddy, you're the youngest one with us here on stage, and you want to show off because there was no internet back when you were in school. And when you talk about Ada and these women who meant a change, a changing point in her time, and when you speak about her with younger girls, what do they think about? What do they think? Well, first of all, there is a very logical response, because we are all infected by the patriarchy virus, and if they have not been acknowledged, they say, it's because they were not that good. And even myself, I believed that at that time. And then by and by you realize things, and then you find out about the glass ceiling and concepts like that it's hard for you to make breakthroughs in certain areas. And we have realized this. We have realized that things need to be changed, and it's usually it's always the winners write history, and history is written by men, because in art, science and politics it's and was this way. And if Ada was with us today, she would be a revolutionary woman. She would be on Twitter, on Facebook, speaking up and speaking her mind. She would be able to reach out to the youngest girls, because she had that sensitivity that helped her understand communication. Because at the end of the day, that's what she did. She communicated herself through a machine, beyond mechanisms. And whenever I meet teenagers, and that was actually very good for me, because I got answers very interesting. Because sometimes they tell me, don't forget this woman, she was great, and this scientist, she was great. So they told me about many good things. Well, that doesn't mean that all the work has been done. It just means that we need to keep on working more and more. But it is amazing, because they go through phases such as, I can't believe she was not well known, because she was even if she was brilliant, she was not that brilliant, she was not acknowledged. That's the first phase. And then themselves, they rediscover history, and then they can rewrite history through that. Okay, now I'm going to introduce our Martians, our Tuesday people, and they are privileged enough to be able to ask questions here with us. Who's got the microphone? They are the only ones. Well, they can ask questions, but also on Twitter. You can also tweet your questions. And come on, don't be shy and ask any questions you might have. Andrea's got the microphone. Go on.
Hi, my question has to do with university classes in physics, mathematics, and so on. It is true that there are very few girls in those faculties. Could that be a problem with education? Because in the end, girls and boys, men and women, receive exactly the same classes at school, at college. So what is defining that? What is causing women not to go into scientific degrees? Why is that? And that's a very good question, and a very complex one. If we had an answer, we might come up with a solution, but there are many things that influence. She has a 4-year-old child, and she's coming back home after school, and she's in Frozen is for girls. Now that he's 4 years old, when he went from kindergarten to school, the environment where this boy is moving is saying that there are movies for girls and movies for boys. That's when you are 4 years old. The most difficult age is when you're around 12 or 13. So from 4 to 10 or 12, it is not the education that you receive at a school, it is the mothers and fathers, but the whole environment. And the whole environment, I don't know why, is turning more and more male chauvinist, so to speak. I have a 32-year-old boy and a 22-year-old girl, and there were books and there were books for ages, but not for different genders. And there was, of course, toys for girls and toys for boys. But the girls perceived that whole bias, and of course they assimilate it, they internalize it, and they believe it. And our responsibility is to convince them that all those messages that they are receiving are false, are wrong, that you are as good or as bad as a boy can be for medicine, for mathematics, and so on and so forth. There's a majority in medicine. Around 60 or 70 years ago, they said that a woman could not have the cold blood to be a doctor, for example, or to be a surgeon. And now 70% or 75% of the students are women in medicine and surgery. That was the most male-dominated field. There's starting to be as many women as men. So and it's perfectly, it's working perfectly. And so I don't know why we are conveying that message to our girls, and they start to believe that there are some tasks that are not for them. Do you have that same stereotype with so much weight in education for girls and boys in the United Kingdom?
I'm not sure how it is as the experience in the classroom, but I do know that there is a theory that in the 80s, when computer science courses were being created and the advent of gaming, it was decided to include a lot of the gaming into the course for computer science, and that coincided with the dropping off of young women being involved, because the games that they were using as examples to teach were not attractive to young women, such as shoot 'em up games. Now, of course, we know that more women play games than men, and that's completely changed. But I know that was probably one of the things that was going on. I'm not sure how it is now. I do know from talking to, for instance, a teacher who teaches physics last week, he was saying that he has only one student that's a girl in his A-level class, and that's pretty normal. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse, which, worse than one? Yeah.
¿Querías comentar algo, Goyi?
Yo puedo hablar.
And did you want to say something, Goji? I can tell you about my world, which is the social media world, and I remember that at the beginning of YouTube, it was all girls. Everything. We were all girls, and now it has become a forbidden area for girls, and they are heterosexual boys, only heterosexual boys. So the girls have fled from there, and they have gone to Instagram. So these migration flows, social and digital flows, are determined probably by the lack of empathy. I think it is the key. The message that they are building in the media, in the social networks, is very much addressed to boys, and so we are not able to find empathy, we are not able to connect or to find rapport. And the tools that we have right now within our reach are incredible, and we are putting together a whole revolution. And in regarding the degrees, the careers, I did journalism, and we were 60% girls and 40% boys. And the truth is that I lived that difference, and I saw how there were fewer and fewer girls that were deciding to study those degrees, and they preferred arts, or they left the degree. Many of them left their studies because the professors were men that were not able to communicate with them. I think that is a source of concern for all of us. I think if it is not a problem, it is a symptom of a problem, a deep problem that we have as a society. Eva Gascon is asking through Twitter, we need more books as Adela Munoz one to get them to schools. Is there any project devoted to rewriting her story? I don't know if anyone is thinking, perhaps you.
Personally, I'd love to do more than I already do. There's just time in the day. But I do know about Wikipedia has got a group that is spread out all around the world, and they come together on certain days where they all write and update Wikipedia with stories about women. There is a anti-movement on Wikipedia that then deletes their work, which is quite a big struggle. And the reason why they do it on certain days at certain times, because they want to flood it to mean that they can have as many stories that are left behind that don't get deleted, which I think is incredible that there's people out there thinking they need to remove the stories as quickly as they're created. Just have to fight harder.
En relación con esto de borrar a las...
Regarding what you were saying about deleting women's work, I got to know through the internet and then at a meeting that they were saying that the gamer girls, they felt uncomfortable, and then they organized a forum and they were subjected to such a harassment that it was cancelled. But the good news is that they were able to organize it later on. Yeah, I don't understand why and how can there be men who waste their time hustling women because they are going to organize something for women. I don't know what moves them to devote their time to pursue, to go around chasing those girls because they want to meet. I don't understand. I think that they feel that their privileges might be in danger. That's what they feel. But that's stupid, I think, because nobody wants to have any privilege. Really, the more damage or hurt you feel, the more you react, and that's what they feel. They feel attacked. And I think that it is also positive, in inverted commas, to see that how they get they react, because it means that we are doing something right. But it is really alarming that it is an increasing phenomenon. But the event that you were talking about, it was a success in the end. They were able to organize it in the end, and that's what we have to do, to keep fighting. When they were explaining at researcher and technologist women's meeting, they said that there were positions in companies, in technological companies. They said that in the United States there was something similar to that, but there were even threats, threats to kill them, the organizers, and it was so aggressive that they even had to change their mobile phones, and in some cases the address they had to move. So they really feel very much threatened if they act like that. I think they are terrified right now, and the message that we should convey to all women is to keep fighting, and then to men, keep listening. And I think that with that we might avoid many conflicts, but anyway, we should be prepared for whatever comes, and in the case of scientist women, to keep encouraging and inviting them to safe places where they can work. They don't feel that it is a safe place to discuss and to work. In the case of the gamer girls, it's impossible to go to an event and without having a guy telling you that you don't know how to do things, that it's not like that shouldn't be done like that, and so on. Those boys that want to include girls, they should also stand up and fight and to give them a voice, and to take advantage of the means that they have available to give them a voice. Let's see who has a microphone. Fernando? I was a little bit surprised and impressed with the stories that you were telling, Billy. But I would like to open up a a what-if question. What if Ada Lovelace's and Babbage's publication would have been a success, because I had heard in a TED talk, what is impressive is that it was negligible the repercussion that it has. But would that have changed the concept that science is something for boys? What do you think? Who wants to answer this difficult question? You?
I think it would have changed a lot of things. I think Sidney Padua's book, The Illustrator, is very good because she imagines a world where they do create their machine. But we would have had a mechanical computer 100 years before the mechanical computer that was built in the UK. We would have had calculators that were far more complex well before the calculators that were created in the late 19th century. The impact is different from what we've got today, because the silicon chip was a huge revolution for what computers could do. It made computers personal devices. But if we didn't have the silicon maybe arriving, we still would have had extraordinary innovations that I have no idea what would have happened. As far as the idea of it being more equal, it was still a patriarchal society then. So you have Rosalind Franklin and other women like Lisa Meitner in the 40s and 50s and beyond. We have women that are still working today that don't seek accolade. There is a culture that still happens. It's getting better, but it still happens, where the men are required to stand up. They are required, it is expected of them to speak up and claim ownership. Women's education is still not that strong to say, stand up, own it. This is the message that young men are still given, that to be a man you have to stand up and own your thing and to be strong. You know, that's the pinnacle in many cultures of what it is to be a person, and a man is to be a leader, whereas a woman is still said, you know, you're good, great, keep going, just don't bother telling anyone that it's your work, because that's their job. So if Ada Lovelace and Babbage had done it back then, I'm sure that a lot of people would have known that it was Ada's work, but I don't think necessarily anyone would have thought anything of it. She'd have been the woman in the background. And there is a quote that she said, which is, "I'd rather be great than be known to be great." She could have meant several things, but I like to take it as a typical feminine perspective, which is, I would like to do a good job. I don't need everyone to know about it. And until that changes, you know, women aren't really expected to stand up. I think they should, though. So who knows? You answer.
Well, I think you did perfectly.
Que se me vuelven locos los traductores en castellano.
Please speak Spanish. We have translators. They tell us all the time, no, speak in Spanish, and English, speak in English. I think you have answered very well a very difficult and very complex question, but we, of course, cannot know what would have happened. What we can know is that we have wasted a lot of talent for centuries, because if the question that Fernando asked, we would have asked it, we would rephrase it, if all the discoveries and all the breakthroughs of men would have been done by women, the world would have made a lot of more progress, perhaps. There is lots of talent that was just left unknown because it was a woman. Yeah, and those who contributed was because they had talent, and they had also personality and courage, and they could stand up. But there are many women who didn't bear the pressure that she suffered. Her husband went to war and he died, and that's why she could stand up. But if he had not died, she wouldn't have done most of what she did. Perhaps it's as simple as that, because she was a brilliant woman, but with a very laid-back attitude. And so there are lots of women about whom we are not aware of, and that perhaps they didn't develop their potential because they didn't have that minimum amount of encouragement. Mary Somerville was just an example. Her father was against her, her first husband was against her, and she wouldn't have done anything. She would have studied secretly. Then the second husband became a member of the Royal Society in order to present her works and to get from the library the books that she needed. That was a platform that she used to do what she did. She was very lucky, but many women didn't have that second husband, and perhaps they buried all their talents at home. Yeah, and there are many women who did something that perhaps could have done a lot more. Caroline Herschel, for example, could have done a lot more than just being a companion of her brothers, and she was one of the fortunate ones. Yes, she was, curiously enough, in spite of all her limitations, I talked about her in the book about someone who discovered a comet. She was the only one who received a salary as her role as a scientist. She had a brother that took her away from home, and she had she had typhus, and her mother thought that she wouldn't have. She had smallpox, and she just could make a living just by cleaning. She had lots of. She was like Cinderella, and she was a singer as well, and she developed a whole career as a soprano. Although her mother prevented her from taking classes, but her brother took her to Bath, to England, and he made a living out of music, and she developed, just to help him, a whole career, to the point that she had offers to work apart from her brother, and when he changed his role, and his hobby became his main task and his main profession, and then she followed her brother, and she just not only made food for him and nurtured him. She made calculations, he wrote the reports, and when he decided to build the telescope, she was the workshop manager, and they worked in several shifts, and she was working one shift after the other, creating those Herschel telescope. One of those excellent telescopes came here, and it can now be seen here after the French just destroyed the structure. But she was lucky enough to have a brother that helped her, but from being a Cinderella. But from all those included in the book, she always said that she had no ambition whatsoever, and men always show their ambitions, but women, the scientist women, they have to have an ambition to at least to know and to understand and to be recognized. She said that she was just a well-tamed dog that followed her brother's instructions, but he died, and then she continued to publish and to review and to observe the skies and so on.
So she got, let's acknowledge the exceptional work of Enrique Flores. He's there drawing and finishing his drawing and everything we are saying. So let's see how his graphic summary is doing. It's very comprehensive, very beautiful, and it's very interesting. Look at it. We do talk a lot, aren't we annoying? In different languages and all. I got my thinking face, look. And Edna's got the microphone right now. Are you enjoying this? Do you like this?
No te pongas colorado.
So don't blush, Enrique. So you can go on with your work. So do not feel you're being observed. Don't feel observed. Okay, you have the microphone. Do you have a question now? Hello, good evening. So before I ask my question, I would like to say something, because this is the first time all the speakers are women, and this is it's very interesting, because well, ever since I started coming here every Tuesday. But I think it's funny that it happens to be on an exhibition on women, and the day when we have an exhibition on the importance of women, having men coming to talk about it, then we would have even more equality. My question is related to a piece of news I read yesterday on the Nobel prizes. Out of everything that have been awarded, only 43 are women. This is a very a big concern for the academia. In the Nobel, they are going to get together and meet to try to find out why this is happening. And well, I think that even if we are already having a more open approach on female scientists, we are not actually doing much in the present right now. What do you think about this? In science, there is about 5-6% of women awarded with the Nobel Prize. And this year, out of all the 9 awarded persons, there are no women. This is ridiculous, especially if you take into account that in Europe, at least, I don't know about the US, but in Europe, 30% of scientists are women. There are women in every area, and in some of them, such as medicine, biomedicine and chemistry, there are lots of women at all levels with very relevant contributions. And here we are struggling, we are fighting for something that is very prestigious with a lot of money, and there is this circle of men voting for men, and those awards do not show neither the quality of the contributions or the amount or the percentage of women working in science. When something is truly coveted and there is a small number of it, women just shoulder their way forward, and they get it, and they share it among themselves. And not just the Nobel prizes, these Spanish science prizes have been the most prestigious one. They have been for men, and the academia, the different academia, the academia of the Spanish language and all that, they don't have that many women. Whenever there's something very attractive, there is a lobby where women do not have a place. So there needs to be a legislation opening up the way for women who are sitting by their sides and working with them, and that's it. And Boye was nodding while you were saying this. It's funny that people in the academia say this is a scandal and let's meet to find out what we are doing. Well, this is a very weird parallelism, but there is a series, BoJack Horseman, where they invite to TV 4 men to talk about abortion. Same thing. Well, you didn't. This is not about serious. This happens all the time in many talk shows, in many places. Yeah, men talking about what women need to do with their bodies, and this is exactly what is going to happen with the members of the academia. They might be wondering, how come the system is failing? How can this? How can it be possible? And people in the academia, they are meant to be bright people. And they're going to come to the conclusion that yes, we do need to come up with some legislation with parity, and this will end up being another weapon used by the patriarchy, saying that this is not their own merit. This is like giving women something they do not deserve. And if we haven't achieved this, it's because we haven't made the effort we were supposed to make. And then in some time we will be back to the same point, and they will try to invisibilize women. And we already have, we always have, and we have now very bright women. And in the Forbes list of the greatest mind with big fortunes, there are only 4 women, all of them related to jobs that always have to do with the world of woman, beauty, fashion, things like that. And this is sad. We are not changing the roles. We are not changing anything at a big scale. And having them meeting is just like a circus show. It is a way to try and perpetuate this and keep it for longer. Do you think we have not gone that much forward? Not just I'm speaking about society, not just women. I'm speaking about the whole of society. I think we have achieved many things in the 80s, and as it happens after every revolution, then people lay back and relax. At the beginning, in the 90s, beginning of the noughties, we have laid back, and now it's time to go back to work and to go back to do things. And we don't want to be snobbed again. We need to find a way so they do not feel that they're giving us that like we are beggars getting their crumbs. I don't know how to put it without offending anyone, but in the society, something is... we don't want our children to make us feel more ashamed than our parents do. Okay, so who's got the microphone now? Oh, Camino. Going back to women throughout history, I would like to ask you, each of you, whether you can name an example of one of those hidden wise women that could be inspiring for new generations, and names that are hidden in the textbooks and hidden from science, apart from Ada. We've heard about her a lot. Well, there are many examples, and there are about 25 in my book, because I wanted to to develop a lot about each one, and I had to rule out many of them. We have named Caroline Helscher, who's something very appreciated by teenagers. She's loved by teenagers. And Maria Sibilla Maria, she was the first field entomologist, and back then, well, she was raised in a guild. Guilds used to be a little bit less aggressive for women, because they could learn a profession at a lower level than men, and they could manage to get some status, and above all, meet their husbands. So arranged marriages were not with unknown people, they were made this way. So she learned her father-in-law's job, drawing, and not only that, she was fascinated and amazed about silk worms and metamorphosis, and she was raising worms to try and understand that wonderful phenomenon. This is a time and a place where many women had been burned for being witches, for doing things not that crazy as raising worms. They thought that insects were a result of rotting. They were creatures of the devil. So she got married to one of her friends from a colleague from her guild. They separated, she went to a cult, and she ended up in Suriname watching tropical insects. She classified them, went back to Holland, where she wrote the most complete catalogue of the time on tropical insects. It was a great selling book. And in the next century, she was completely ruled out because she didn't speak Latin, because she was a woman, and because she didn't have an academic training, because women were not allowed in the universities. Well, it was really difficult for them. So she, Maria, was not a noble woman. She was not rich. She didn't have an important mother or daughter. And in spite of her non-favorable environment, she was the owner of her own life, and she was an artist, she was an entomologist, she was many things, and she died in 1716, I think. She's a wonderful woman, acknowledged in Germany and Holland. In the 21st century, they both want to have her as their own citizen, because she was born in Holland and died in Germany, or the other way around. And she was in the 50 marks notes in Germany, and her drawings are coveted by collectors, and now it's acknowledged that she was the first person to study insects in their habitat, which is an achievement. In the Oxford Library, I found an entomologist, a clergyman from the 19th century, that said that she didn't deserve it because she gave too much importance to African women in plantations. And this clergyman says her description of a marabunta is absurd. This clergyman didn't know anything about this. He didn't know what that plague is, and she criticized her for describing her. She said, well, she's got goodwill and she's been through tough things, but you couldn't take her really seriously because all her narrative was influenced by African women, etc. But if you dig, you can dig out many interesting women. You need to read history again, read between the lines, and go back to the archives to dig out all those women that have been covered in sand by historians. There is a Sumerian woman who had lots of power over 3,000 years ago. Back then, women had a much higher status than they had later on in Greece, Rome, and obviously afterwards. And I'm speaking about the Sumerians, where writing began, as well as maths, law, astronomy, architecture. Not science though, because they used to look at the stars to try and understand what the gods wanted to tell them. So no science. But women had a much more relevant role back then than they did in the following millennia. So achievements are never consolidated. There are steps forward and also step backs. Apart from those historical examples, there are very inspiring women in the present, such as the three women I have here. We can find women in our daily lives, right?
Many people will remember a teacher, not just the male teachers, but the women teachers who can unlock immense inspiration and unlock people's potential. But I did want to just mention a woman who is inspiring, because there's a woman called Sophie Wilson who, when you asked the question, I was like, who should I think of? She created the chip that by the 2012 was in 80% of all mobile phones. And that was a woman who did that. And that's something that is very relevant to most people who, swear by these machines in their hand.
Yeah.
And so whenever anyone says that women aren't involved, there's just one who you can say, well, you've probably got her work in your hand. Yeah, so that was one person I wanted to mention. But once you start looking, there are hundreds of thousands of these women, which is what I discovered when I started. I thought I was going to do one story every year. But it's impossible. There's too many. There's so many great women out there. But there's the living women as well as the historical women. Mm. So they're on your doorstep. They'll be your aunt, your brother's once removed sister-in-law. There'll be women very close to you who are very inspiring, doing exciting things.
Estaba pensando que Bolly es creador audiovisual.
I was thinking that Bolly is an audiovisual creator and a journalist, and pretty, obviously, and she's got the gift of the gab. And how many women have been the first ones in the cinema, the pioneers in the cinema, and when it became a business, men jumped in, and all those screenwriters, all those creators, all those artists disappeared. There are many examples. Do you have any you would like to name about the cinema or science? There is one I particularly like, not because she's invisibilized, but because she's well visibilized, and she's Yoko Ono. Yoko Ono is Koi is laughing because she knows Well, Yoko Ono is the person that's been most insulted and hated in our generation, and that makes me think there is a very serious problem. Yoko Ono was an artist much before John Lennon. She was very intelligent. She belongs to the left, what's left of the Japanese nobility. She's got peace messages that might seem a little bit naive, but they were very progressive at her time. And she's always dwelled in the shadow of her husband. And I'm not saying John Lennon is not important, not at all. I just believe that she was the great manager, the great creator, the great the one that took on a role to give the Beatles a role they wouldn't have had themselves on their own. So she was revolutionary, and she's not invisible. She's a good example of bad visibilization. They did great things, but history and men who write history have humiliated them and insulted them. And she is not, which is also fascinated, and she's many things, many great things. Which Martian has got the microphone in their hand? First of all, I would like to mention, to say to Zoe, that you mentioned what the thing with Wikipedia. I'm an administrator for Wikipedia. I didn't know anything about that, and I think it's very interesting, and I would like to discuss this afterwards. But my question is, you talked about the bridge between science and number, and Ada with her poetical side. She cultivated both. Do you think their approach with the analytical machine has to do with the origin of human language? What a great question. Who does?
I know that some people now are talking about teaching computer science and programming language as a language. And actually there's talk, I don't know how serious it is, but in education, people I've talked to in Ireland and also in the UK and in France, there's an idea of teaching it as a language because it might feel the humanity of it is something that people could relate to easier than the technology of it. Not the answer to your question, though. I will pass that on.
Muy elegantemente. Adela.
Yo no sé cuáles son los requerimientos para hacer.
I don't know what's required, what it takes to consider something a new language or a new way of communication. How do you consider a way of communication a new language? But that divide between art and science is artificial, and it's counterproductive, because we tend to think that scientists are cold, but to make science move forward, you need to be emotional and passionate, because you have data, but you need to interpret that, and you need to question new things and think of new experiments and new tests different from what's been done before. So it takes creativity that's not related, that's not usually related to science. But obviously we need creativity and we need passion, otherwise you don't achieve anything. If you just go over the same experiments as others did and you see the same figures and you can come up with the same relationships and interpretations, then science would not move forward. So that divide is artificial, and Ada's character, who had a great ability for science and also a great artistic sensitivity, is what makes the difference, and is what sets the great scientists apart. You need to have both sides, And again, science takes a lot of creativity. Actually, before being called scientists, they were called philosophers, up until quite recently, yeah? So that was the creativity to find your own eureka moment. And I would say more. You say it's unreal and that divide does not exist, but how many children have failed in science because we didn't have the appropriate teacher? Well, you had Ada as a teacher. Yeah, I was privileged. I had Ada, myself, and Rosa for history. I was really lucky. I was privileged because all my teachers pass on some passion to me, except for the physics teacher. It never worked out. No, it was. I didn't work out for the physical education teacher for me. Yes, but that divide does exist, and I'll give you an example. One of the most watched channels on YouTube is math professors. He's taught all of the students in my generation, basically, because we don't get to connect to a passionate teacher, and that man on YouTube is very passionate. There are many dissemination channels on popular science that make science accessible. And to answer to your question, I think that Ada stated how important communication is. And at the end of the day, that's what she was. She was a communicator, a mediator, a translator. And we can see this nowadays. We still need translators. We still need facilitators to clear the way to understanding. And she was maybe not the first one, but the best one to do that. Rodrigo, you wanted to say something about Wikipedia. You're a Wikipedia editor. You didn't know about that. You said you didn't know about how that information was being erased or covered in sand. Do you want to say something else?
Well, no, I didn't know about that, and that's the only thing. But I do know that there have been editathons similar to a marathon, editathon. There have been several editions of Wikipedia in order to reflect women. There have been several, but I didn't know that other side. And it would be very interesting to be able to unveil it, to uncover it. It is a lot. There's a lot being done for women, but we do not know what is being done against, because if we don't know who is doing things against, we cannot fight it. I think it is essential that there are young people writing in Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is our mirror today. That is one of the many and the great revolutions that the internet has brought about, and Wikipedia is the main source of consultation, I think, that for everyone. In Wikipedia, the last thing I read, I don't know if that is changing, I think that editor women didn't reach 10%. So we are again writing a history, not her story. It is not being written by women, and then there are women writing it, and then men are deleting it. So Wikipedia is an excellent weapon, an excellent tool. It can have that bias, but that is our mistake. We should take a step forward, and so we need those editathon encouragement for Wikipedia, for wise women, but also for the prior book that I wrote, a history on poison, and I have seen how it is becoming more and more powerful, more and more quality. As in 2006, I have had as a reference the Encyclopedia Britannica, and I started to see a homophobic, Europe-centric bias, and also male bias, and I hadn't realized until I saw the Wikipedia. And so if you think that Wikipedia is making the same mistake, we should fight that, of course. But the danger that I see is that the Catholic Church is rewriting many chapters, in particular the ones that I have been reading lately that have to do with science, where the relationship with Galilei was almost of love. And there are lots of very well documented and well written articles, and then I have another colleague that writes about science, and he was telling me, quite indignant, he was telling me about how it is they are rewriting, they were rewriting the Wikipedia because right now it is the main source of documentation and of information for almost everyone. So the Vatican has one of the best archives, and they have seen what potential the Wikipedia has, and so they are rewriting many chapters of history according to what I know, mainly regarding science and their relationship, love and hate relationship with scientific achievements. And so we need to be aware of that. We need to read a lot in order to see that systematic bias where all the conflicting ages of the church are being rewritten. They write very well and they are very subtle, but they end up being biased. And so the women in the room, we should encourage ourselves and be daring enough to do that.
Just wanted to comment on what you were saying. We need a Wikipedia entry for every Wikipedia editor, so that we know who wrote which bit of the history, because we can say, oh, that was written by the Vatican. and so we understand the writers of our history and understand
quién es la fuente, entenderemos.
If we know what is the source, of course, you're right. I encourage all women to write, and also men and women to, among all, to get rid of that bias and to start turning up the stones that have buried a part of history, and to think that we all together, working together and using the talent of everyone, the world will be a better place. I encourage you to continue to read and to follow these three wise women that have visited today. We are trending topic at national level today. That's good news for us. We were reprogrammed because there is another event. There's another very important or very not very important topic that is taking place right now at the same time, but we are having trending topic anyway. So thank you very much everyone for being here, and please remember forever the second Tuesday of October, which is Ada Lovelace's Tuesday day. Sorry. Thank you very much. Thank you to our drawer, and thank you to everyone, all the attendees. Thank you.